On May 10th, 2017, a rock the size of a microwave fell from a cliff 40 feet above me and landed directly on top of me. Through a lifetime spent in the mountains and through building a career as a professional skier, I've learned that rockfall is an inherent risk in the mountains, but perhaps one of the hardest to predict, and as a result, the scariest. You see, when water percolates through the rocks and then it freezes into ice, that ice is the very thing holding the rocks together. And so in the spring, we're wary of rapid warming because if that ice melts, a rock might release. That's exactly what happened on May 10th, 2017. That rock fell directly on the back of my head, in the middle of my upper back, and right here on my left arm. The 1.5 inches of high-density foam and plastic of my helmet is why I'm here today. It's why I'm alive. But I'm also here because I made decisions to save my own life. My first fear was that I would bleed out on the hillside. So I told my ski partner to tourniquet my arm, cut off blood flow. My second fear was that if we asked for help, if we called for help, that we'd be putting people at risk of life and limb coming to save me. And so instead, we made the decision to self-rescue. My ski partner put my skis on my backpack, and we climbed off of the east face of Mount Hood back to the summit ridge. When we reached the summit ridge, my ski partner took my skis off of my backpack, and it turns out that that rock had also landed on one of the toe pieces of my bindings, breaking it, mangling it. But somehow, some way, my ski partner found a way to make that toe piece affix to my boot one last time. And then I took an ice axe in my right hand to self-arrest should I fall. And we skied down through the pearly gates, one of the classic climbing routes of North America. At the base of the pearly gates, there's a bergschrund where the glacier is separating from the hillside. Below, a crevasse, 60 feet of air. I went first, airing over the crevasse. My ski partner followed. And he took off to the bottom of the mountain to arrange for a helicopter to save me, to help me. And that left me all alone, now with my ice axe, holding my lifeless limb to my body to ski 5,000 vertical feet all alone. When I made it to the bottom, I realized I didn't know how to get the binding off of my boot. I did the only thing that I could think of in that instant, and I skied directly onto the pavement of the parking lot, and I screamed help at the top of my lungs. It's still the most uniquely raw, human experience, moment of my entire life, to literally cry out at the top of my lungs when I can't help myself in the hope that a stranger answers the call. He did. His name's John. But that day, I wasn't ready to learn the lessons that were right there in front of me. Even though this was the greatest, most important turning point in my life, I wasn't ready to learn the most important lesson of all: asking for help. I spent my entire life growing up in a ski town, in a mountain town, in outdoor culture, believing that I needed to be strong. I was raised on a version of masculinity with a ski hard, party hard, stay hard mentality, to never show weakness. I never asked for help physically, and I most definitely did not ask for help mentally or emotionally. The earliest memory that I have of suicidal thoughts is from when I was 9 years old. I know that because I was in the 4th grade. At that same age in elementary school, the teacher always asks, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And for some reason, in Summit County, Colorado, at 9,000 feet above sea level in the Rocky Mountains, a lot of kids wanted to be marine biologists. Now, personally, my answer was always the same. I wanted to be a professional skier. And I did it. I built a career as a professional skier. I'm still skiing professionally. I am, quote unquote, living the dream. And despite all of that, building this life that I so badly wanted, landing on magazine covers and ski films, that external validation is never a solution to internal turmoil. Despite all of this, I was left with a dissonance. Because I had this secret reality. I was still struggling with those same suicidal thoughts from when I was 9 years old, all the way into adulthood. Even though I was getting paid to travel the world and ski powder in front of cameras. And that left me feeling ashamed. I went into a spiral of feeling like I shouldn't feel this way. How could I possibly be struggling with these things inside when my life is so good? I didn't even have the language at the time to understand what was happening in my mind as mental health or suicidality. And all of that resulted in me on May 10th, 2017, finally having to face my reality head on. Now, I didn't have coping mechanisms at the time, and so the only thing that I could possibly think to do after that rockfall accident was to get back on skis. Despite not being ready physically, mentally, or emotionally, I went back to Mount Hood 6 weeks later. The night before, I went out and I partied, and then I woke up at 4 a.m. and I went and climbed the volcano alone, likely still drunk. And I sat here on the summit ridge, in the same location where we made that binding fix to my boot one last time. And I drank a beer. At the time, I said I wasn't looking for answers, but in hindsight, I most certainly was. Why did that rock fall on me? Why did I survive? Should I be dead? Am I supposed to be dead? And those questions spiraled into thoughts of making that my reality of my own accord. That spiral of suicidal thoughts consumed me for the next year. It got to the point where the last thought before I went to bed and the first thought before I opened my eyes in the morning was that I should kill myself. That landed me in a place where I was either going to end my own life or I was going to ask for help. And fortunately, in August of 2018, I chose the latter. I chose life. Now, I'm going to share with you the second most embarrassing way I've ever gotten hurt as a professional athlete. Because the first most embarrassing way I've ever gotten hurt as a professional athlete is when a mouse dislocated my shoulder. But that is a story for another time. The second most embarrassing way I've ever gotten hurt as a professional athlete, I was trail running here in Colorado, and I tripped and fell. And I just had bilateral shoulder surgeries because my physical body was breaking under the emotional trauma of what I was experiencing. And I didn't put my arms out because I didn't want to tear my shoulder surgeries. And that resulted in me breaking my clavicle and sustaining a minor concussion. Now, as someone who has very nearly taken my own life, in part due to the after effects of brain injuries, it is ironic when I say that I am grateful for that concussion that day. Because one of the lesser talked about symptoms of concussion is a loss of emotional control. I finally broke down that day. I finally had to let people in. It was that day that I asked my mom and my brother to find me accountable to finding professional help. The morning before I went in for surgery to get a plate and 6 screws put into my collarbone, I took this picture. This portrait is what it actually looks like to ask for help. It's ugly, bruised, scarred, and broken. This is what the next 3 years of my life looked like. Not just finding a therapist, but going into her office and finally giving a voice to my suicidal thoughts for the first time in my life. To being diagnosed with bipolar disorder, PTSD, finally addressing the brain injuries going on in my brain. To looking in the mirror and admitting that I needed to stop drinking and following through. This is the portrait of what those things took. Yes, it's ugly, but it also took the most strength in my life. As someone who has jumped off 80-foot cliffs on skis and run 100-mile ultramarathons as my side hobby in the summer, I promise you that asking for help took more strength than any of that. But my story is the story of our community. I was back home here in Summit County in March of 2020. And in the span of 16 days, less than 3 weeks, 2 students at my alma mater high school died by suicide. In those same 16 days, 2 more students attempted suicide and lived. It was in that moment that I saw myself. I saw myself in those kids because that so easily could have been my outcome. And I knew 100% hard stop, no questions asked. I was going to get myself to a place where I could help those kids. I had to. I knew I had it within me. 7 of the 10 Rocky Mountain states consistently rank in the top 10 highest suicide rates in the country, Colorado being one of those. According to the 2023 CDC Youth Risk Behavior Survey, 20% of high school students have reported seriously considering attempting suicide in the past year. 20%. But this isn't just a Summit County thing. This isn't just a youth thing. In America, statistically, an American dies by suicide every 11 minutes. By the time you finish listening to me tonight, a person in the United States of America will have died by suicide. So when I say that my story is the story of our community, I don't just mean that my story is the story of Summit County. I mean that Summit County is the story of the Rocky Mountain West, and the story of the Rocky Mountain West is the story of America, which is the story of humanity. So why not apply the same lessons? How I saved my own life on a communal and societal level. Now, when I was growing up as that 9-year-old kid, pro skiers were my heroes. I idolized them. And I realized that if there had been a pro skier who I looked up to, or frankly anyone with that denotation next to their name, talking about mental health, talking about depression, talking about suicide, my entire life would be different. That would have saved me decades of pain. And I knew I could change that. So I did. I re-engineered my life and my career in this mission of mental health awareness and suicide prevention. I wrote an essay for Outside Magazine titled, "We Need to Talk About Mental Health in the Mountains." Following that, I made a first-of-its-kind ski film titled Ups and Downs. 25-year skiing journalist Jason Blevins called this the most important ski film ever made. This past year, I did it again. I made a film titled Feel It All. And that name holds the message, the thesis, that there's beauty, value, and that it's worthwhile to experience the entire spectrum of emotions and of the human experience. And some random YouTube commenter said this was the best film ever made. But I didn't just make these films and put them out online. I made these films and I took them on tour. I took these to ski film premieres, the ones that I begged my dad to take me to as a little kid, and I was the youngest person there. These are places normally full of beer, stoke, and high fives. And I took a conversation that rarely exists in any of those back corners. and I took it on stage, on the big screen, and I put it front and center where we couldn't ignore. Because that's what we need to change our culture. 2 years into this process, this girl, Celeste, reached out to me. She told me that she had been at a screening of my first film in Tahoe City, California in 2021. And she told me that night that by watching my film, I gave her the language to better understand what she was experiencing. And I gave her the courage to tell her parents that she needed professional help. So when she reached out to me, we got coffee, and she wanted to interview me for her senior project in high school, which was on how to help teenagers struggling with depression and suicidal thoughts. And then she invited me to go to her final presentation. And I sat there in the front row in her high school, and I cried tears of joy. It made me so proud, not of the influence or impact that I had on her, but on seeing her growth and achievement in such a short time, at such a young age. I made myself into the role model that I wish I had as a kid. And while I sat there and listened to Celeste, I saw the role model that I'm grateful I have now. That's who she is to me. That's the ability we all have when we have the strength to ask for help. The thing about asking for help is like anything else in life. The more we do it, the better we get. Vulnerability begets vulnerability, but asking for help makes it easier for those around us to ask for help themselves. And if we want to create communities who thrive and save lives, we need to show each other how to ask for help. Because that is how we are going to change the culture of mental health and how we are going to change the culture of suicide in America and on the planet Earth. Thank you.